Imagine being in a relationship where you are constantly asked to prove your worth, your actions, and even your time. It's not about love or support anymore. It's about validation, approval, and constantly being needed in ways that drain your emotional resources. In the world we live in today, where self-worth is often tied to the opinions and expectations of others, there's a crucial lesson to be learned. Stay away from those who demand certain things from you that strip away your autonomy and erode your peace of mind. Today, I'm here to discuss the 5 key demands that you must avoid in relationships, because these are the very things that threaten your emotional balance and sense of self. Manipulation is a distortion of power, where one person attempts to control another for their own benefit, often without regard for the other person's well-being or autonomy. These people might appear charming, likable, or convincing on the surface, but their underlying motivation is to create an imbalance in the relationship. They may mask their true intentions behind kindness, flattery, or promises of something in return, but the goal is always to exploit your resources, emotional, financial, or otherwise, for their own benefit. When someone asks for things that aren't reasonable or fair, the result is that you are constantly giving. They might ask for time, attention, money, or even an emotional investment that goes beyond what you're comfortable with. The request itself may seem harmless, but the accumulation of these demands over time can leave you feeling drained, overextended, and even resentful. These individuals rarely take no for an answer. They might guilt-trip you into giving more, or use tactics like playing the victim or presenting themselves as helpless. The subtle pressure they apply creates an environment where saying no feels impossible, and any attempt to set boundaries is met with resistance or manipulation. The key problem here is that these manipulative demands are not based on a sense of mutual respect or care. A healthy relationship, whether personal, familial, or professional, is grounded in a balance of give and take, where both parties are willing participants and where each person's needs are acknowledged and respected. Manipulative people, on the other hand, do not see the relationship as an exchange. For them, the goal is self-interest, and they are willing to push your limits to achieve that. It might begin subtly, but over time, they may begin to ask for more than you are comfortable giving. They might ask for help when they know you are already stretched thin, or expect you to put their needs above your own repeatedly. Manipulative behavior can also involve a lack of appreciation for what you provide. No matter how much you give, it is never enough. These individuals don't value the time or energy you've invested in helping them. They will ask for more, sometimes without any gratitude or acknowledgement. The imbalance can lead to a sense of worthlessness in the relationship, where you feel like nothing you do is ever truly enough to satisfy their demands. Another aspect of manipulation is the emotional toll it takes on you. People who make these types of demands often lack emotional boundaries. They might expect you to constantly fix their problems, listen to their woes, or bear the emotional weight they refuse to carry themselves. This is particularly harmful in relationships where one person is expected to constantly provide emotional support while the other gives nothing in return. Over time, this can lead to emotional exhaustion, where you feel like you're pouring from an empty cup. Instead of receiving emotional support when you need it, you become the perpetual caretaker, without any regard for your own needs. The imbalance grows, and you may start to feel as though you are nothing more than a tool to fulfill the other person's desires. This manipulation can also take on a more covert form, where the individual uses psychological tactics like gaslighting. Gaslighting, where your perception of reality is questioned or distorted, is a powerful manipulative tool. They may twist your words, create confusion, or make you second-guess your own feelings. This is a form of control that leaves you questioning your sense of self and, ultimately, more willing to comply with their demands. When you consistently give in to these manipulative demands, you begin to lose sight of your own needs and desires. The relationship becomes skewed in favor of the manipulator, and you are left feeling unfulfilled, overwhelmed, and possibly resentful. Over time, the manipulator's influence can erode your sense of self-worth, making you believe that your value is solely based on your ability to meet their needs. This is not a healthy dynamic, and it can take a long time to recognize it for what it is. By that time, you may already be deeply entrenched in a cycle of giving without receiving, which is difficult to break free from. Recognizing these manipulative patterns early on is crucial. Being able to identify when someone is asking for more than is reasonable or healthy is the first step in protecting yourself from being drained emotionally and mentally. Setting boundaries, asserting your needs, and knowing when to say no are essential skills in preventing manipulation from taking hold. When someone tries to control your decisions, actions, or personal growth, they are infringing upon your autonomy. Autonomy is the core of personal freedom, the ability to make choices for yourself, follow your own path, and shape your life according to your values and desires. Healthy relationships, whether with family, friends, or colleagues, thrive when there is mutual respect for the individual's ability to make decisions without being coerced or restricted by others. Control, however, erodes this autonomy, often in subtle and insidious ways. People who try to control others usually operate from a place of insecurity or a need for dominance. They may attempt to dictate what you wear, who you spend time with, what goals you pursue, or even how you should think about certain issues. At first, this may appear as advice or guidance, but over time you may start to realize that they are subtly imposing their will on you. The boundary between guidance and control can be thin, and when someone crosses that line, they can begin to undermine your sense of self. One of the most common forms of control is through emotional manipulation. For example, someone might pressure you to make decisions based on what they want, rather than what you truly desire. They could use tactics like guilt, fear, or even love to coerce you into complying with their wishes. They might say things like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this for me," or "I can't believe you would choose that over me." The underlying message is clear. Your decisions should be based on their preferences, not your own. Over time, this constant pressure can cause you to second-guess yourself, making it harder to trust your own instincts or judgment. Control can also manifest in more overt ways, such as dictating where you go, whom you spend time with, or how you live your life. A controlling person may isolate you from friends and family, subtly pushing you to choose them over everyone else. This is often done under the guise of caring, but it's a form of manipulation that weakens your social support system. By making you dependent on them, they are creating an environment where they have more power over your decision. They might even claim that their advice or instructions are for your own good, implying that you cannot make decisions without their guidance. When someone tries to control your personal growth, they limit your ability to evolve into the person you are meant to become. Personal growth requires space to explore your interests, pursue your goals, and make mistakes along the way. A controlling person may resist or even sabotage your efforts to grow in ways that challenge their authority or expectation. If you decide to take a different path, such as pursuing a new career or developing new skills, they may try to discourage you or criticize your choices, asserting that what you want isn't practical or wise. This kind of control limits your potential and can lead to a sense of stagnation or frustration. This control can be particularly damaging in intimate relationships, where the expectation is that both people should have equal input into the direction of the relationship. However, a controlling partner may dominate decisions, leaving little room for your own preferences. They may dictate how you spend your time together, the activities you do, or even how much freedom you are allowed in the relationship. This stifles the individuality of each partner and creates an unequal, unhealthy dynamic. Over time, it can lead to resentment and emotional exhaustion as one person constantly bends to the will of the other. In professional settings, control can take the form of micromanagement, where someone attempts to dictate every detail of your work or decision-making process. This can feel suffocating and demoralizing, as it prevents you from using your own skills and judgment. Instead of fostering independence and self-confidence, a controlling person creates an atmosphere where you feel incapable of making even the simplest decisions without their approval. Control can also have a profound impact on your mental and emotional health. Constantly being told what to do or how to think can erode your confidence and self-esteem. You may begin to doubt your abilities and feel like you are incapable of making good decisions. This self-doubt often reinforces the power dynamic, where the person controlling you becomes the sole authority on what is right or wrong, leaving you feeling small, unsure, and ultimately dependent on them. Recognizing when control is creeping into your relationships is essential to maintaining a sense of independence and self-worth. The first step is to become aware of how often your actions are being guided by someone else's desires or expectations, rather than your own. Are you making decisions based on what you truly want, or out of a sense of obligation or fear? Are you allowing someone to dictate your choices, or are you asserting your own voice in the process? It's important to honor your autonomy and make choices that align with your values and goals, even if those choices don't meet the expectations of others. Healthy relationships are founded on mutual respect, and that respect includes the freedom to make your own decisions without undue influence or control. There are individuals who expect others to carry the emotional weight for them, and this can create a deeply unbalanced and toxic dynamic. People who demand excessive emotional labor often lack the ability or willingness to manage their own emotional needs, and instead they expect others to step in and take responsibility for their feelings. Emotional labor refers to the work involved in managing emotions, both your own and the emotions of others. It includes offering support, empathy, and understanding, often at the cost of your own mental and emotional well-being. While it's natural to offer support to loved ones or close colleagues, when this becomes a one-sided expectation, it can quickly become overwhelming and exhausting. At its core, the problem with people who demand excessive emotional labor is that they fail to recognize the importance of reciprocal care. A healthy relationship, whether personal or professional, is built on mutual support. Everyone in the relationship should feel that their emotional needs are acknowledged and met, and they should also be capable of supporting others in a way that doesn't deplete them. But when one person becomes the emotional caretaker while the other remains emotionally dependent, it creates a power imbalance that leads to feelings of burnout, resentment, and frustration. A key element of excessive emotional labor is the expectation that you will always be there to pick up the emotional slack. This might mean being constantly available to listen to someone's problems, without any recognition or acknowledgement of your own needs. It could involve providing emotional support during crises or difficult times without ever being offered the same in return. These individuals often expect you to drop everything to attend to their emotional state, regardless of your own circumstances. Their emotional crises become your responsibility, and the focus of the relationship shifts entirely to managing their feelings, leaving little room for you to express or address your own emotions. This dynamic can take a variety of forms. Sometimes, the person who demands excessive emotional labor may make you feel guilty for not being there for them at all times. They may use tactics like emotional blackmail, telling you that you don't care enough or that you are neglecting them. In these cases, they are using guilt to manipulate you into offering emotional support, even when it is clearly detrimental to your own well-being. This creates a vicious cycle where you feel compelled to give, even if it means sacrificing your own mental health or emotional stability. Another dangerous aspect of excessive emotional labor is that it often leads to emotional exhaustion. When you constantly give of yourself without receiving emotional care in return, your emotional resources become depleted. You may find yourself feeling drained, anxious, or even depressed. The emotional weight you carry for another person can feel burdensome, and if the other person shows no recognition or appreciation for your efforts, it can deepen the sense of frustration and resentment. Over time, this one-sided dynamic erodes the connection in the relationship, and instead of feeling fulfilled by helping someone, you feel increasingly resentful and unappreciated. The issue of excessive emotional labor is also tied to a lack of emotional boundaries. When you give so much of yourself emotionally, it can be difficult to maintain clear boundaries. You might find yourself constantly worrying about the other person's emotional state, feeling responsible for their happiness or well-being, even when it's beyond your control. It's important to recognize that you are not responsible for someone else's emotional state, and you cannot carry that weight indefinitely. Your own emotions and needs are just as valid as theirs, and you have the right to set limits on how much emotional labor you are willing to invest in a relationship. People who expect others to handle their emotional burdens often lack the skills to deal with their own emotions in healthy ways. Rather than learning to self-regulate, process their feelings, or seek professional help when needed, they rely on others to take on the emotional work for them. This is not only unfair, but it can also prevent the individual from developing emotional resilience and self-awareness. They become dependent on others to manage their feelings, which only reinforces the unbalanced power dynamic in the relationship. In the long term, consistently providing emotional labor for someone who doesn't reciprocate can negatively impact your own mental health. It can lead to feelings of inadequacy, frustration, and helplessness as you try to keep up with the emotional demands of another person. The more you give, the more you may feel like your own needs are being neglected or even invalidated. If the emotional labor continues without any mutual exchange, you may find yourself emotionally depleted and questioning the value of the relationship. In any relationship, it is essential that emotional labor is shared equitably. Everyone has emotional needs, and while it's natural to support one another through difficult times, no one person should bear the entire emotional burden. Healthy relationships are characterized by a balance of care, where both parties are able to express their emotions, seek support, and provide help when needed. If you find yourself in a relationship where excessive emotional labor is expected of you, it is important to establish boundaries and communicate your needs clearly. Recognizing the signs of emotional exhaustion and seeking mutual support can help preserve both your well-being and the health of the relationship. There are individuals who thrive on controlling how you view yourself, often seeking to manipulate your self-worth in a way that leaves you dependent on their approval. These people consistently ask for validation in the form of constant affirmation, wanting you to base your value on their perception of you. This demand for approval can subtly erode your self-esteem and create an unhealthy power dynamic in the relationship. The danger lies in the fact that when you rely too heavily on someone else's approval to determine your worth, you lose sight of your own sense of self and become increasingly dependent on external validation. At first, the request for validation may appear harmless. A person might ask for reassurance, seek compliments, or show signs of insecurity, and it's natural to offer support in those moments. However, when this need for validation becomes excessive, it turns into a demand. The person begins to expect you to provide constant affirmation, not just for their appearance or actions, but for their very existence. This creates an environment where their self-worth is entirely tied to how others, particularly you, perceive them. Over time, these individuals may make it clear that they rely on your feedback to feel good about themselves. They might constantly fish for compliments or ask for opinions, but they won't accept anything less than praise or approval. If your opinion doesn't align with their idealized version of themselves, they may become defensive, hurt, or even angry. This sets the stage for a dynamic in which you feel compelled to always offer positive feedback, even when it's not entirely honest or deserved, in order to maintain the peace or avoid conflict. This demand for validation doesn't just affect their behavior, it also starts to affect your own actions, as you may feel pressured to bolster their self-emotion at the cost of your own honesty or emotional well-being. One of the more insidious effects of this constant need for approval is that it can cause you to doubt your own perception of the world. Over time, you may begin to question your own thoughts, judgments, and sense of self because you are conditioned to think that their approval is more important than your own self-assurance. The more you give in to this demand for approval, the more you may lose touch with your own internal compass. You start to internalize the belief that your value is only validated through their eyes. In this way, you stop living according to your own principles and instead mold your actions and decisions to fit what pleases them. This dynamic can be particularly harmful in intimate relationships. The foundation of a healthy relationship is based on mutual respect and appreciation, where both individuals can freely express themselves without fear of judgment. However, when one person demands constant validation from the other, it shifts the focus of the relationship from equality to an unhealthy need for constant reinforcement. It's not about mutual support anymore. It's about one person feeding off the other's need to affirm their value. This can lead to a cycle of dependence, where the person seeking approval becomes emotionally dependent on the feedback they receive and feels lost or invalidated without it. In friendships and professional settings, the demand for validation can have similarly damaging effects. A friend or colleague who constantly needs to be reassured may drain your emotional energy, as you find yourself in the position of constantly offering affirmations to someone who cannot seem to find any sense of self-worth without it. Over time, this can lead to frustration, as the relationship becomes centered around one person's insecurities rather than a balanced exchange of support and care. You may begin to feel emotionally exhausted, unable to meet their need for constant validation while still fulfilling your own needs and maintaining your sense of self. The worst part of this pattern is that it can trap both individuals in a vicious cycle. The person who needs constant validation may grow increasingly insecure and dependent on the feedback they receive, while you, the person offering that validation, may begin to feel as though your needs and feelings are secondary. As you give more of yourself to maintain their sense of worth, you may start to feel empty or unappreciated. Your role shifts from being a partner or friend to that of a cheerleader or source of external validation. This is not a sustainable or healthy dynamic. In relationships where the demand for validation is constant, you might begin to lose your own sense of identity. You become so focused on supporting the other person's emotional needs and maintaining their self-esteem that you forget to nurture your own self-worth. Your decisions become less about your own desires and more about how you can ensure the other person feels good about themselves. This shifts the focus away from healthy self-expression and mutual support and creates an environment of emotional dependence. This dynamic can be particularly damaging in personal growth. When someone asks you to constantly affirm their worth, they may limit their own growth, relying on external validation instead of developing internal confidence. By constantly seeking validation from others, they avoid addressing their own insecurities and may never learn how to build self-worth independent of others' opinions. You, in turn, are also put in a position where you must constantly reinforce their self-image, which prevents you from growing and developing your own sense of worth apart from their needs. To navigate these relationships, it's important to recognize the difference between healthy support and excessive validation. Offering reassurance in moments of doubt is a normal part of any relationship, but when validation becomes a demand, it's a sign that boundaries need to be established. By recognizing the signs of excessive validation seeking, you can protect your own emotional well-being and help guide the relationship back to a more balanced, healthy dynamic. It's essential to foster self-worth that comes from within, rather than relying on external sources, and to encourage those around you to do the same. One of the most damaging behaviors in a relationship is when someone expects to control your time, often through excessive demands or expectations that leave you feeling overwhelmed and stretched thin. Time, like emotional energy, is a finite resource, and how it is spent is one of the most personal and valuable choices you can make. When someone tries to monopolize your time, they are infringing upon your autonomy and disregarding the importance of your personal space and commitments. This demand can come in many forms, whether it's insisting on your attention during work hours, constantly requesting your presence for events or activities that don't align with your interests, or even expecting you to drop everything to cater to their needs. At its core, this behavior demonstrates a profound lack of respect for your individuality and your right to prioritize your own life. The pressure to constantly be available, to prioritize someone else's needs above your own, can create an atmosphere of suffocation in a relationship. People who demand your time excessively often do so with little regard for what you need or want, which creates an imbalance in the relationship. They might not even recognize that they are doing so, but their expectation that you should always be there for them, no matter the cost to your own schedule or personal commitments, can quickly lead to feelings of resentment and burnout. This imbalance can begin to feel like a constant drain, where your own goals, responsibilities, and desires are sidelined in favor of someone else's agenda. Time is often seen as one of the most precious resources in our modern lives. The way we allocate our time directly affects our well-being, personal growth, and overall life satisfaction. When someone starts to demand more of your time than you are able or willing to give, it undermines your ability to focus on your own aspirations, responsibilities, and self-care. This person may fail to recognize that your time is not infinite, and each moment you spend attending to their needs or wishes is a moment you cannot use for yourself. The more you give in to these demands, the less time you have for your own growth, rest, and emotional recharge. Over time, you can feel as though your life is being shaped by the needs and demands of others, leaving you with little room for your own dreams or personal development. These demands on your time can also leave you feeling guilty for wanting to maintain boundaries or for saying no. Someone who constantly requires your time may use guilt as a tactic to manipulate you into complying with their wishes. They might say things like, "I don't understand why you're too busy for me," or "If you really cared, you'd make time for me." This type of emotional pressure can make you second-guess yourself. even when you know that you need to set limits in order to preserve your own well-being. It creates a scenario where you feel responsible for their happiness or emotional state, leading you to prioritize their needs over your own, even if it is detrimental to your mental health. Over time, this imbalance of time management can begin to have a profound impact on your emotional state. You may find yourself feeling anxious, overwhelmed, or even resentful because your time and energy are being constantly consumed by someone else's needs. You may begin to neglect your own self-care or other important areas of your life, such as work, relationships, or personal interests, in order to accommodate the person who's demanding your time. This can lead to burnout, where you feel physically and emotionally drained, unable to meet the demands of others without sacrificing your own well-being. The demand for your time can also affect the quality of the relationship itself. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and understanding, which includes respecting each other's time and boundaries. When one person demands excessive amounts of time and attention without reciprocating, it creates an unequal dynamic. You may feel unappreciated or taken for granted, as though your time is not valued or respected. The relationship can begin to feel more like an obligation than a partnership, leading to dissatisfaction and emotional distance over time. In professional settings, the demand for excessive time can also be damaging. Colleagues or supervisors who expect you to work beyond your limits, or who constantly require your attention for non-urgent matters, can undermine your productivity and work-life balance. This can leave you feeling overwhelmed and frustrated as you struggle to meet their expectations while also trying to manage your own responsibilities. When your time is constantly being pulled in different directions, it can be difficult to focus on your personal growth or advance in your career, as you are always accommodating others instead of focusing on your own goals. The key to maintaining a healthy balance in your life is recognizing when your time is being manipulated or over-demanded. Setting clear boundaries and asserting your need for personal time is essential for preserving your mental health, well-being, and sense of autonomy. It is important to recognize that your time is valuable, and it should be spent in ways that align with your goals, responsibilities, and personal desires. Learning to say no and prioritize your needs is not selfish. It is an essential act of self-care and respect for your own life. If you are in a situation where someone is excessively demanding your time, it is important to communicate your needs clearly and assertively. Let them know that while you value the relationship, you also need time for yourself, and that your time is not infinite. Healthy relationships are built on mutual respect, and part of that respect includes recognizing and honoring each other's boundaries. When someone fails to do so, it is important to recognize the imbalance and take steps to address it before it negatively impacts your well-being. By setting boundaries around your time and sticking to them, you not only protect your own well-being, but also create the space needed for healthier, more balanced relationships. There are individuals who require constant reassurance about their actions, choices, and decisions, and this need for validation can turn into an overwhelming and exhausting dynamic. While it is natural for everyone to seek reassurance occasionally, there are people who demand it continuously, often to the point where it becomes a burden to those around them. This behavior reveals a deeper insecurity and lack of self-confidence, where the person relies on others to affirm their choices and actions instead of trusting their own judgment. These individuals are often afraid of making mistakes or being judged, and they seek validation from others to alleviate their anxiety. The need for constant reassurance can manifest in a variety of ways. It could involve someone constantly asking for approval or feedback, even after they've already made a decision. They might repeatedly ask, "Do you think I did the right thing?" Or "Are you sure this is okay?" This behavior indicates a lack of confidence in their own ability to make decisions and a deep reliance on others to make them feel secure in their choices. Over time, this demand for reassurance can become exhausting because it places a heavy emotional burden on the people around them who are constantly expected to validate the person's actions, even if those actions don't require external approval. This behavior not only drains emotional energy, but also diminishes the autonomy of the person who is providing the reassurance. When someone is constantly seeking validation from you, it creates a dynamic where your own opinions or needs take a back seat. Your time and emotional resources are spent trying to reassure someone else, and your own perspective becomes secondary to theirs. The more you give in to their need for validation, the more you may find yourself feeling resentful or emotionally depleted, as their constant doubts and insecurities take up more and more of your mental space. The issue with needing constant reassurance is that it reflects an underlying fear of being wrong or making mistakes. This fear can lead to paralysis in decision-making, where the person becomes unable to move forward without first seeking the approval of others. This often results in indecision, delays, and an inability to take responsibility for their actions. Rather than developing the confidence to trust their own judgment, the person becomes increasingly reliant on others to give them the permission they feel they need in order to proceed. This dynamic can create a sense of stagnation, as the person never learns to make decisions independently and continually seeks validation before taking any action. The person seeking constant reassurance may not realize the burden they are placing on those around them. What starts as a simple request for validation can quickly escalate into an ongoing cycle where the individual becomes overly dependent on others to feel good about themselves. The constant asking for reassurance can also become frustrating because even when the validation is given, it is never enough. The person may continue to seek confirmation, leading to a never-ending cycle of doubt and insecurity. This becomes emotionally draining for the person providing the reassurance, who may begin to feel as though they are being taken for granted or that their own needs and opinions are being overlooked. The cycle of reassurance can also undermine the development of the person seeking validation. Instead of learning to trust themselves and their own decisions, they become stuck in a loop of dependency, constantly seeking affirmation from others. This prevents them from developing emotional resilience and confidence in their own abilities. Over time, they may feel less capable of making decisions without external input, which further reinforces their reliance on others. This lack of self-confidence can affect many areas of their life, from personal relationships to work situations, where they may struggle to take initiative or make independent choices. This need for constant validation can strain relationships. In personal relationships, it can make the other person feel as though they are walking on eggshells, constantly needing to offer reassurance and approval. This can create an environment where communication becomes centered around providing validation, rather than meaningful dialogue or mutual support. The constant need for reassurance can also cause frustration because it can feel like no matter how much support is offered, it is never enough. This leads to a situation where the person seeking validation becomes more dependent, and the person providing reassurance feels increasingly drained and unappreciated. In professional relationships, the need for constant reassurance can affect productivity and creativity. An individual who is always seeking feedback and approval from others may struggle to complete tasks independently or to take risks. They may avoid making decisions without first consulting others, which can lead to delays or missed opportunities. In a work environment that values autonomy and initiative, this behavior can hinder progress and create friction with colleagues or supervisors, who expect the person to act independently and confidently. The demand for constant reassurance can also hinder personal growth. A key aspect of developing self-confidence and emotional resilience is learning to trust yourself and your own judgment. When someone is constantly relying on others for approval, they are not learning how to cope with their own doubts or how to make decisions without external input. This can prevent them from gaining the skills necessary for self-reliance, which are crucial for personal and professional success. It can create an environment where the person feels insecure, even when there is no reason for doubt. Because they are constantly seeking approval, they may begin to view their actions through a lens of uncertainty, even if they are performing well or making appropriate decisions. This reinforces a negative cycle of self-doubt and insecurity, where the person is unable to appreciate their own strengths and abilities. Ultimately, the need for constant reassurance is a reflection of deep-seated insecurity and a lack of self-trust. While it's natural to seek support and guidance from others, it becomes problematic when this need turns into a continuous cycle of dependency. People who demand constant reassurance often do so because they are afraid of being wrong or judged, and they rely on others to make them feel secure. However, this behavior prevents them from developing the confidence and self-reliance needed to navigate life independently. For those providing the reassurance, it can be emotionally exhausting and frustrating, leading to a sense of imbalance and resentment. The key to breaking this cycle lies in encouraging self-trust, fostering emotional resilience, and setting boundaries to ensure that the need for validation does not overshadow the importance of self-worth and personal autonomy. In relationships, whether personal or professional, it's vital to maintain a sense of self-respect and emotional autonomy. The 5 demands we've discussed: validation for every decision, the need for constant attention, control over your time, demands that shape your sense of worth, and the manipulation of your emotional resources are behaviors that erode the foundation of healthy, balanced relationships. These demands exploit your emotional energy, leaving you exhausted, resentful, and disconnected from your true self. While support and reassurance are natural in any relationship, when they cross the line into manipulation and dependency, it becomes essential to set clear boundaries. True fulfillment in relationships comes from mutual respect, where both parties are able to thrive independently while also offering support to each other. No one should ever have to sacrifice their peace of mind or sense of self for the comfort or approval of another. It's time we recognize the importance of preserving our emotional well-being by stepping away from relationships that demand too much, too often, and in ways that ultimately detract from our happiness. Remember, the most valuable relationships are built on trust, respect, and balance, not on demands that diminish your sense of self. Keep your peace, protect your time, and most importantly, trust in your own worth, because you deserve relationships that uplift you, not ones that take from you endlessly.